one analogy I love to give people, and they say, well, yeah, but these things change over time. I'm like, you're suggesting that age by itself, just days passing on the calendar clock, somehow have changed your brain's function. And this is really important for parents of younger kids, because some schools and some educators or some principals who are well-intentioned typically, and they're just speaking from their own professional experience, will say things like, well, you know what? It just hasn't clicked yet. They need another year for the brain to mature, and then it'll click, because some kids click later for reading and spelling, and other kids click younger. And we just need to give her another year of the same practice. And I say that because that was my experience as a parent. My own school didn't really understand my background as a brain scientist, a neuropsychologist, published researcher, dyslexic myself, but I got early intervention at age 5, all those factors. And so I had to explain to the principal and to the first grade teacher, getting older doesn't really change the brain's function. Because if that was true, then we'd say all men age 50 are perfectly mature because they've lived long enough. Now they're mature and they don't have, silly behaviors or, irresponsible behaviors or insensitive behaviors. And many people will tell you that that's just not true. And I know many 50-year-olds are completely irresponsible. They're not mature. They don't function well in life. And age did not give them those skills. So the brain builds skills in one neuroscientific way. It's called experience-dependent neuroplasticity. It means if you don't give the brain the right experiences, and there's several elements that go along with this. It's experiences plus frequency of instruction, experiences plus intensity of instruction. The experience plus, is it very specific instruction? And are the experiences or the instruction in a developmental hierarchy from basic skills first to mid-level skills to advanced skills? And are all these things happening? The intensity, the frequency, the specificity, the neurodevelopmental hierarchy, are they happening long enough for a long enough duration that the brain really has built wiring that's going to stay for a long time? It's kind of like saying if we gave you one bike riding lesson and then you never saw a bike again for 10 years, you probably aren't going to have any bike skills left. But if you gave you a week of bike riding lessons and you rode your bike at age 6, 7, 8, and you spent years riding your bike, and you take a 20-year hiatus from bike riding, well, those skills are so well wired, that network was so well built, it didn't just go away. It's most likely still there, might be a little rusty, but you built it so strong that the brain doesn't typically just completely obliterate unused networks. But you did it for enough duration that you built that network that will last. And once you get back on the bike and start riding again, you'll feel it starts to come back faster and faster each day.
So we have a true difference from what I like to call dystechia and dyslexia.
Yeah.
So, we hear that thought process a lot in public schools, that the kid just didn't, like you said, they just didn't click, or they just need more time, or they need this. However, what we know is that if the brain wiring, as we said, we're rewiring the brain. If the wiring isn't, either you can say isn't there, or we can say isn't efficient. And this goes along with our strengths and weaknesses model, right? So we're not saying that you don't have the ability to read. We're saying that your wiring, the way that it is inefficient, and you're not able to read and comprehend. And it even goes back to the fluency, as we were talking about, being able to hold on to that information after we've read the passage and be able to answer the questions.
Right.
So that's the reason why when we start talking about rebuilding the language portion of the brain, we're talking about making sure that we're not providing splintered skills, meaning we're not starting from the second floor when we're building this house. We got to go all the way back to ground floor, make sure that our foundational skills are completely intact before we start moving forward. And that's the reason why we have dyslexia remediation programs in schools. However, what we find a lot of times is they tend to start trying to build from the second floor up.
Yeah. Well, we like to say is they're the print up programs that try to also go down to speech processing, which is the reverse of the developmental model of how the brain actually learns language skills. All language skills in most every language are spoken speech processing skills first. That's the foundation. You speak and listen. Well, I should say you listen to speech for about a year or so, and then you start speaking as you're listening, and that input speech system and output speech system typically builds for about 4 years, depends on which country you live in, but in the US, about 4 or 5 years before we teach you the letters of that language. So now Foundations, as a neurodevelopmental multisensory treatment program, it was built from the model of how does the brain typically build phonological awareness before it gets to print, so that it's actually easier and more efficient in actually building all these sounding out skills and sight word skills. And it helps, that analogy of explanation of developmental hierarchy helps many parents understand why OG programs, which are all print first, speech later on, or print plus speech, they're never the phonological neurology of phonological processing with no letters first and then go to print. They're typically far less effective, and they don't have randomized controlled trials. We're actually not even sure how effective they are without the randomized controlled trials that Dr. Sally Shaywitz says every dyslexia program must be vetted by randomized controlled trials, because that's when you compare one treatment to a second treatment to a third treatment with a group to figure out what's the one that's the most effective, that gives us the largest number of students improving, the largest amounts, and the best long-term outcomes. So it's trying to understand those developmental hierarchies, how they fit into our treatment program models as well.